Good morning and welcome to the Morristown Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. If it's your first time here in our sanctuary or joining with us online, my name is Alison Miller, and I have the great privilege of serving this congregation as its minister. And today I am joined in our worship service by our Director of Music Ministries, Stearns Matthews, by our Sunday Associate, Marjorie Wormser, by Gabor Kiss, who is filming today. Thank you, Gabor. And by Alex West, who is on audio and visual and sound and visual, so that we can be with you who are joining us online. Let us open by sharing the following affirmation. I'll say a series of words, and then I invite you to repeat it if you agree with it. It is good to be. It is good to be. It is good to be here and there. It is good to be here and there. It is so good to be here together. It is so good to be here together. Welcome, one and all, and special thanks to our lead usher, Alan Hicks, as well. It does take a village to create worship. Marjorie, would you come forward and share some of our announcements?
Good morning. My name is Marjorie Wormser, and I want to welcome you to our spiritual home. Welcome to everyone in this room and to those joining online. We are so glad you're here. I have a few announcements. First, today we are delighted to host another Odyssey presentation at 1 p.m. here in our sanctuary and also on Zoom. You'll find the link in Wednesday's e-blast and in the pastoral update from Alison Miller. Second, next week you're invited to join the lunch bunch after the second service at the Florham Park Diner at 12:45 p.m. The lunch bunch meets pretty much every Sunday except when we have an Odyssey project presentation, so I think everyone will be here. Third, if you are new to the fellowship, you are invited to join the Orientation and Visitors Tour following both services on the last Sunday of March. That'll be March 27th. These are in person, and there will also be an online orientation and tour that day at 1 p.m. on Zoom. Finally, today's collection will go to support Ukraine and in its entirety, specifically the medical needs and refugee assistance. We are splitting today's offering between United Help Ukraine and Save the Children Ukraine's Crisis Relief Fund. We invite you to give generously via text, via our website at www.muuf.org, or via cash in the basket, or checks in the basket, or mail checks here as well. 21 Normandy Heights Road, Morristown 07960. Once again, welcome to newcomers, long-timers. We are so glad to be here together.
I invite you to join me in reciting the covenant that's printed on the order of service. The words are by James Villa Blake. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And then I invite you to join me in a responsive reading, number 438, Morning by Clinton Lee Scott. And the words will be on the screen behind me, and they're also number 438 in the hymnal. And I invite those who are gathered here to read along with me on the italicized words, and I'll read this in its entirety so that the folks at home can hear the full reading. It's called Morning. From the east comes the sun, bringing a new and unspoiled day. It has already circled the earth and looked upon distant lands and faraway peoples. It has passed over mountain ranges and the waters of the 7 seas. It has shone upon laborers in the fields, into the windows of homes and shops and factories. It has beheld proud cities with gleaming towers, and also the hovels of the poor. It has been witness to both good and evil, the works of honest people and the conspiracy of knaves. It has seen marching armies, bomb-blasted villages, and the destruction that wasteth at noonday. Now unsullied from its tireless journey, it comes to us, messenger of the morning, harbinger of a new day. And now I invite you to join with us. We made a switch to our music, so we're going to sing the opening song is This Is My Song, number 159, a song of peace. I invite you to rise and to have your mask on and to hum along. Stearns will be singing the music. And very soon we'll be resuming singing, maybe next week, but with masks on, so.
This is my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for lands afar and mine. This is my home, the country where my heart is. Here are my hopes, my dreams, my holy shrine. But other hearts in other lands are beating with hopes and dreams as true and high as mine. My country's skies are bluer than the ocean, and sunlight beams on clover leaf and pine. But other lands have sunlight too and clover, and skies are everywhere as blue as mine. Oh, hear my song, thou God of all the nations, a song of peace for their land and for mine.
And now Marjorie is going to share a story from Unitarian Universalist history by 2 colleagues of mine, written by the Reverend Julia Hamilton and Colin Bosson. And Julia, as Marjorie reminded us, was the former first director of the UU Legislative Ministry. So thank you, Marjorie, for sharing the story.
For those of you newer to us, the UU Legislative Ministry of New Jersey is now known as UU Faith Action. So the United States entered World War I in April of 1917. Shortly afterward, Congress passed the 1917 Espionage Act, which made it a crime for people to speak out against the country's involvement in the war or to encourage draft resistance or conscientious objection. As a result of the act, several hundred people were arrested. Peace and social justice organizations, minority political parties, and radical labor unions were repressed. Against this backdrop, the General Conference of Unitarian and other Christian churches met in Montreal, Canada for its biennial meeting. Events at the conference challenged the Unitarian tradition of free speech and dissent. In advance of the meeting, John Haynes Holmes, minister of the Church of the Messiah in New York City, prepared an official report outlining different attitudes found among Unitarians towards the war. The report, though authored by Holmes, was presented on behalf of the Conference Council, an official body designated to assess the state of Unitarianism between meetings of the conference. The report asserted that there were varying attitudes maintained by Unitarians towards the war. Holmes identified 4 groups. The first were those who agreed with President Wilson that the Allies are battling to make the world safe for democracy and held Germany and its allies to be the aggressor. The second supported the war effort, but were less certain about with whom the fault lay. The third felt that the war must be brought to an immediate end, even if that meant peace without victory. The final group, a small minority to which Holmes belonged, were pacifists and opposed not just the current war, but war in general. The remainder of the report was split between a plea that nothing is more important at this time than opportunity for full, free, and fair statement of all points of view, which argued for the right for people to hold dissenting opinions, and Holmes's hope that churches could develop a ministry of reconciliation and create a gospel of peace. After hearing the report of the council, the president of the conference, former U.S. President William Howard Taft, was outraged. He expected Unitarians to line up firmly behind the war effort. In an effort to make the position of the Unitarian denomination clear, he made a motion stating resolved that it is the sense of this Unitarian conference that this war must be carried out to a successful issue, to stamp out militarism in the world, that we, as the Unitarian body, approve of the measures of President Wilson and Congress to carry on this war, restrictive as they may be. Taft's resolution resulted in a debate between Taft, Holmes, and others as to the appropriate response to the war. Holmes stated, "I am a pacifist, a non-resistant. I hate war, and I hate this war. And so long as I live, I will have nothing to do with this or any war." He was not trying to force his opinion on others. He only wanted to show that there were many different opinions held by Unitarians. In response, Taft argued that it was necessary for the Unitarians to show that there was only one opinion among them. Doing otherwise would not respond adequately to the great issue that is being fought for which the blood of our dearest is being shed. At such a time as when our house is afire, it is not proper to consider whether the firemen are using the best kind of water, Taft orated. Taft's motion was carried by a vote of 236 in favor to 9 opposed. And over the next few months, the board of the association, the board of the American Unitarian Association, the AUA, which is the predecessor to the UUA, Unitarian Universalist Association, voted to deny aid to congregations with ministers that did not support the war. As a result, most of the Unitarian ministers who had taken pacifist positions in opposition to the war lost their pulpits. In protest, Holmes resigned his fellowship with the American Unitarian Association and convinced his congregation to rename itself the Community Church of New York. Throughout the rest of his life, Holmes remained a steadfast pacifist and an outspoken critic of the United States government. In addition to playing a central role in the founding of the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP, and the War Resisters League, he is remembered for his part sorry, I need my second cup of coffee here. Holmes is remembered for his part in introducing Mohandas Gandhi widely in the United States. After his retirement from ministry, Holmes resumed fellowship with the American Unitarian Association, and today, the Unitarian Universalist Association honors his memory through the annual Holmes Weatherly Award, which is given to an individual or organization whose lifelong commitment to faith-based social justice is reflected in social transformation. More important than Holmes's reconciliation with the AUA is the fact that the General Assembly of the association decided in 1936 to recant its denial of aid to congregations with ministers who did not support the war. In World War II and subsequent wars, the AUA and the UUA have supported conscientious objectors and those who have spoken out against government policy. And now is the time for our offertory with music by Stearns Matthews, Let There Be Peace on Earth. We are holding a dedicated collection today in the sense that none of the funds will come to the fellowship for the work that we do here. The funds will be split between two organizations supporting medical aid and refugees, namely United Help Ukraine and Save the Children Ukraine Crisis Relief Fund. You can donate at the text to give number 73256 with keyword MUF, M-U-U-F, followed by the dollar amount. You can also give by going to our website, www.muuf.org. Every amount, large or small, makes a huge difference. Thank you for your generosity.
Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth, the peace that was meant to be. With love as our compass, we are family. Let us walk with each other in perfect harmony. Peace begin with me. Let this be the moment now. With every step I take, let this be my solemn vow. To take each moment and live each moment in peace eternal. Let it begin with me.
It is the time in our service where we honor the milestones that have happened in the lives of our fellow congregants since we last met. Here we share the joys of our lives and we celebrate them together. Here we share the transitions in our lives, the ones that are wanted, and we seek to companion one another as we move towards that horizon, and the ones that are unwanted, and we seek to be an ear full of heart and love as we companion one another. And here we share our greatest sorrows, and we surround one another with all of our compassion and our tears and our community, the healing balm of community. Today, I have a very significant and very sad milestone to share with you. Ilya Evans passed away on this week. And for those that have been following Ilya's story or who are newer to find out about it, Ilya Evans is a 31-year-old beloved of this community who was raised in our religious education program, participated in our youth program, and went off into the world and has made an enormous difference in people's lives. He was struck by a car while driving a scooter, and he was wearing a helmet, and Ilya did nothing wrong. But unfortunately, his brain activity never returned to a point that he would have any quality of life or even be living in any conscious sense. And so his parents had the courage to let go, to take him off the machines, and Ilya did pass away. Let us hold Carolyn Evans, his mother, one of our incredible welcome team members, a member of a women's group here at the fellowship, and a beloved who has done so many things. Let us hold Bob Evans, a former member who has moved away, but who is no less dear in this time. And let us hold the way that Bob and Carolyn have taken care of one another at every step. They have shared over and over how much your prayers and your presence has meant to them in this time. We're about to light a candle for Ilya, and I'll invoke one more thing. His was a journey of making a difference and of resilience and recovery. And part of the story is that his friends in Florida, where the accident happened and where he had resided for nearly a decade, have just been testifying to how Ilya brought them new hope, brought them a deepening spiritual understanding when they were in times of despair, and pointed the way towards fullness of life and friendship and sharing love. So we do not grieve the incredible 31 years of his life, even as we mourn sorrowfully that his life ended in an untimely fashion. Let us light a candle for Carolyn, for Bob, but mostly for Ilya's bright light. It is released now into our keeping, but don't keep it, share it. Will you pray with me? Spirit of love, Spirit of life, surround us on this day and in this season of the beginning of Lent, when we come to terms with our human mortality. We cry out, it is too much to bear to lose a young beloved. We cry out with the death of every soldier, civilian, and child, every one of them, whether born in Ukraine or in Russia. We cry out, a human life is sacred. When will we learn to treat it as such? And yet we know, moving in our hearts, moving in this community, moving like a light, like the light of Ilya's life, out from our own hearts into the community, that ordinary human beings are the ones that can help us to turn around and make change, can help us to sow seeds of compassion and understanding and healing in our towns and around the globe. That each one of us can be a part of peace building, of greater resilience for a neighbor, whether near or far. We hold on to that light. We vow not to keep it to ourselves, but each day, as we can, on the harshest of days and the most beautiful, to do our best, to allow it to make way for love, for justice, and for more abundant life. Amen, and blessed be one and all. Will you rise in body or in spirit, and will you sing our Unitarian Universalist theme song, our Unitarian Universalist prayer song, Spirit of Life? The words are behind me on the screen. And let us sing out to Bob, to Carolyn, to the world.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
I have one announcement before I begin my sermon. Ilya's memorial service will happen here and on Zoom on April 23rd at 2 p.m., and we'll be sending out more information about that, but I knew people would want to know. And for everyone that's concerned about the men's retreat, there will be a break in the programming or some sort of optional programming so that you will be able to come if you'd like to be here. So. The death tolls and injuries of Ukraine and Russia are rising. They include soldiers, civilians, and children. It seems like Russia may intend a full-scale attack to take over Ukraine. Or perhaps the goal is to take over part, as they have done before with the Crimean Peninsula. Over 1 million refugees, I believe 1.2 million or more, have fled Ukraine. Pictures of the injured, of bombed buildings and fires at a nuclear plant are filling our screens and newspapers. It is a time of fear and uncertainty. Are we only in the early days of war? Will Ukraine's resistance, coupled with that of its allies, lead to a quick resolve? Will Putin's imperial desires lead to a quick overthrow or unceasing, lengthy battles until the entirety of Ukraine or massive parts of the country become Russian territory? Are we witnessing the end to another democracy? The height in terms of the numbers of democracies was in 2012. What is the role for NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization countries? What is our country's role? What do Unitarian Universalists believe about the moral question of whether and when to enter war? These are questions that our country is reckoning with at the moment, and that individual Unitarian Universalists and UU communities have grappled with in the past and may be grappling with now and in the near future. First, let me acknowledge that there are other acts of aggression that have not captured the attention of our media in the same way as this one has. There are a number of reasons, including our fears about the resumption of the Cold War, our sense of proximity to what unfolds in Europe, racism, linkage of our economy with what happens in Europe, and a desire to defend democracy. There may be people in our congregation and online and in the surrounding community who feel frustration that the United States is paying far more attention to this than it has to other battles in recent history. May our attention now to the human toll of war in Ukraine guide us to be more aware and awake as to the acts of aggression around the globe and how we can be at least a healing presence through global humanitarian aid and medical efforts, as well as doing our part to support refugees. When do we do more? When do we choose to enter as allies who help defend a people who have been unjustly attacked by an authoritarian leader who lusts for power, wealth, and empire? We have to be mindful of that question because our hands and our history is not clean. The United States has been engaged in empire building and grabbing resources, natural resources and human resources of other nations to enrich those at the top of the hierarchy in our democracy and our economic system of capitalism. We also have to be mindful because we have intervened on the global stage for what seemed like moral reasons in uninvited ways that have led to not making the difference that we claimed to seek, or even sometimes have led to greater havoc. Can it ever be described as moral to start a war or to join a war effort? We have military families and we have pacifists in our congregation. And that is the case with many Unitarian Universalist congregations. While we believe strongly in the need to work continuously to build peace, to make peace, and to keep peace, we have never taken a stance as a movement for pacifism. Number 5 in our statement of conscience, Creating Peace, passed by the General Assembly in 2010, included these words. 5. For Unitarian Universalists, the exercise of individual conscience is holy work. Conscientious discernment leads us to engage in the creation of peace in different ways. We affirm a range of individual choices, including military service and conscientious objection, whether to all wars or particular wars, as fully compatible with Unitarian Universalism. What makes for a just war? Just war theory has changed over time. In ancient Greece, Aristotle said that war could be waged, quote, as a form of self-defense, to secure an empire, or to enslave non-Hellenistic peoples. Later on, Roman law included, quote, war waged for the sake of a peaceful, prosperous, and secure state. The Catholic Church determined that the Crusades were a divinely justified war. Many terrible wars have been fought in the name of divine right, in the name of religion. European powers conquered this land and stole it from the native peoples, claiming they had a divine right. In the 20th century, up through now, concepts of just war theory were developed around the time of the Second World War. And they became focused on this, responding to the conquering force of tyranny by harnessing the collective power of a greater force. There are some religions that do take a stance that pacifism is the moral path for them. The Quakers are perhaps the best known example. Individual Unitarian Universalists over the centuries have been engaged as outspoken pacifists. We heard one, John Haynes Holmes, earlier, and here's another. William Lloyd Garrison founded the New England Non-Resistance Society in 1838 and was an inspiration to both Martin Luther King Jr. and Gandhi. Here is what was included in their founding documents. We register our testimony not only against all wars, whether offensive or defensive, but all preparations for war, against every naval ship, every arsenal, every fortification, against the militia system and a standing army, against all military chieftains and soldiers, against all monuments commemorative of victory over a fallen foe, all trophies won in battle, all celebrations in honor of military or naval exploits, against all appropriations for the defense of a nation by force and arms on the part of any legislative body, against every edict of government requiring of its subjects military service. Many pacifists to this day believe that peace will only be achieved by peaceful means. While there is truth contained in that statement, there is also truth that the pacifists didn't stop the Holocaust. The questions of peacemaking, just war, and pacifism are emotionally charged issues. We all bring our personal and collective histories to these questions. May each of us be enriched by our collective experiences and wisdom to guide us as to whether or when it is morally just to join a war. None of us alone has the power to determine the answer, but as citizens and residents of the United States, as voters, as people with the power to lobby and make our voices heard, we can have an influence. The 2010 Statement of Conscience passed at the General Assembly, and many of our current-day UU theologians, like Paul Razor and Sharon Welch, are focused in the between just war and pacifism, on efforts of peace building, peacemaking, and peacekeeping. Paul Razor writes, "We should avoid getting caught up in a debate between just war and pacifism." And Sharon Welch speaks of a third way and of the importance of joining efforts to prevent war, stop genocide, and repairing the damage caused by armed conflict. Razor describes his point of view as prophetic nonviolence, and Welch calls it peacemaking. And I'll say that I've benefited greatly from Julia Hamilton and Colin Boston's research to create an adult curriculum about war and peace for Unitarian Universalists. This is what Sharon Welch, a theologian at Meadville Lombard, where one of our members is now president, speaks about. Peacekeeping is about early intervention to stop genocide and prevent large-scale war. Peacekeeping is about bringing hostile parties to agreement, negotiating equitable and sustainable peace agreements that include attention to the pressing need for post-conflict restoration and reconciliation. Peace building is about the creation of long-term structures for redressing injustice and resolving ongoing conflict, as well as addressing root causes of armed conflict, economic exploitation, and political marginalization. That statement of conscience calls each one of us to action and to work actively for peace within. Peace begins with me, peace within our relationships, Peace within our congregations, within our society, and within the world. One of the ongoing opportunities that you have to engage with peacekeeping is our compassionate communication practice groups, also sometimes called nonviolent communication circles, where people are learning how to create peace within relationships. But those same principles have actually been used to negotiate peace between countries. There is our UU, United Nations Office, our efforts to support refugees, our work for climate justice, our work for racial reconciliations and reparations in society, and more. These are some of the opportunities and movements which intersect with both war and peacemaking. The war in Ukraine's borders right now intersects with some of these very areas of work that we are engaging in together. So why? Why did Russia invade Ukraine? One reason is climate change. The peninsula of Crimea, which was annexed by Russian forces from Ukraine, is becoming increasingly arid and uninhabitable for the 2 million people who live there. 7% of their reservoirs are full. Russia is trying to ship in water or to carry it over bridges. But prior to the severing of Crimea from Ukraine, fresh water came in through a canal from the Dnieper River, which I am probably mispronouncing. But to explain the dramatic shift in terms of life there, in 2013, they had 130,000 hectares of land which was cultivated for food, and in 2017, it went all the way down to 14,000, so 10%. On the very first day of the Russian invasion, they took control of that canal and 2 days later destroyed the dam in order to allow the fresh water to flow once again to Crimea. So climate change. And I'll mention that 2020 was the driest year in 150 years of record keeping in that region. Second, wealth and greed. That is why Russia stole Crimea in the first place, and I'll share just a little more. Bottom line, Russia does not want Ukraine to become their competitor. Russia is a petrol state like Saudi Arabia, and Ukraine had the potential capacity to be a competitor. Russia exports oil across the Ukraine to customers in Europe, and after the collapse of the USSR, Ukraine demanded tariffs for the movement through their pipelines. Ukraine had exclusive economic zones within the Black Sea right outside of the Crimean Peninsula, and so Russia toppled the pro-European Union government there, seized Crimea, and then they were able to take control of 80% of the offshore oil and gas reserves. And if you look at the map of Ukraine, there are 2 shale hotspots where there's also an opportunity for natural resources, and they have ceded rebellion in both places, Russia, so that Ukraine cannot access those resources. Shell and Exxon had come in working with Ukraine to create infrastructure, but when Russia successfully created rebellion in areas like Luhansk and Donetsk, the Donbass region, Shell and Exxon left the country, and Ukraine did not have the financial resources to be able to do this on their own. 3, fear and amassing power and proving the power of an authoritarian regime over democratic regimes. Putin is very open about wanting to bring back the Russian Empire for the 21st century. In the early 1990s, when the Soviet Union collapsed, it created 15 newly independent republics, and Russia has only half the population that was in the USSR, and their economy is a little larger than Spain's. So when they see the countries involved in NATO before them, they're afraid. They are afraid of NATO becoming strong enough to prevent them from gas supremacy, essentially. And when Viktor Yanukovych, a president that was in line with Moscow, was no longer in power, Russia moved as an aggressor towards Ukraine. In fact, the demands are that Ukraine never join NATO, that NATO and the U.S. would withdraw all forces ending in that old line of Germany, and that NATO is frozen as it is, and that there can be no military exercises without Russian consent anywhere in the East. And a final reason for why now is population decline. Since the collapse of the Soviet Union, the deaths in Russia have exceeded births. The population is shrinking. And just recently, as of 2 years ago today, we shut down because of COVID-19. And so right now, in peacetime, although they're no longer in peacetime, Russia was experiencing the largest population decline ever. They have 25 million men who are military service age, and every month going forward, that population will get smaller. So this was the time they felt they could take the opportunity. Let me be clear. None of the reasons that Russia invaded Ukraine are reasons that I believe justify their actions 100%. Just because we're talking about times when that is something we have to discern and deliberate around, these are not reasons to start a war, but these are the reasons that the war has been started. But we need to focus today, especially, on the human cost of tyrants and the human cost of war, and recognize and honor their presence in our lives on this day in particular. How many of you have heard of the story from history about the Holodomor, or the Great Famine in the Ukraine? One person, maybe 2, 3. There are very few people in both services. Let me share this story. A Ukraine-Russian tension is not new. In 1932, Stalin resorted to one of the most heinous acts that has happened in history. Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe. All the wheat is there. And he wanted to, quote, teach Ukrainians to stop opposing Moscow. So what they did was they demanded that all of the product had to be taken away from Ukrainian farmers and sent to Russia. And this is called the Holodomor. It was in the spring of 1933. 17 people starved to death every single minute. Over 1,000 people every hour, and 24,500 people starved to death every day. This famine, this human-made famine, wound up killing between 7 and 10 million Ukrainians. a genocide of massive proportion by a tyrant. So indeed, when will the cost of human life be counted? And I want to share one more story about an American soldier that comes from my early days as a minister, from a memorial service where so often our life and legacies are shared. This was the story of a father and grandfather. His son rose to the pulpit and shared how both present and distant his father had been when he was a boy. How he knew that his father loved him through many gestures, hard work, gifts at holidays and birthdays, showing up for his basketball games and showing up for the birth of his young son. And by the way, this is not someone in our congregation. You don't have to guess, because no. Yet, at the same time, his father had been a man of very few words. He didn't remember long talks or speeches. He didn't remember playing with his father. He never felt like he knew what he was thinking. He then turned to his stepmother, who had married his father later in life, and thanked her for the change that she had brought about in his life, and expressed gratitude for all the things that happened between his father and his 5-year-old son. The answer to this man's silence lay in the story that the stepmother told in the reflection which followed. She shared how, as a young man, younger than the son that just spoke, her husband had fought as a soldier in the Vietnam War. He was an officer in command of soldiers whose lives and decisions depended on his judgment, and he was forever changed by that responsibility. He recounted a story that he had bore in his belly alone for decades. One night, when they were hiding out in a building, they heard sounds coming from an adjacent room. Terror seized his heart, knowing that he was responsible for men who stood bravely beside him. On his command, they opened the door and opened fire. And in the next minute, 1 minute too late, he realized that he had killed a boy the same age as his son, whose note he carried in his pocket. That moment changed his whole life. He began to question his worthiness and his humanity. Speech began to fail his ability to express his experiences, and so he mostly fell silent. His wife talked about how grateful she was to bear witness to this misery and to be witness to so many great joys, like the birth of the grandson, the rebirth of his wry sense of humor, and all the travels that they went on. She spoke of how people are forced with terrible choices in life, and how even decent, kind people have moments in life they wish they had never participated in. She spoke of how he was a great love of her life, and her regret that he wasn't able to find and heal in time for his first marriage and for his son's childhood. The final reflection was the grandson's. He came forward and said, "I'd like to say something." And so I lifted him up to the podium mic, and he said this: "It seems to me that my grandfather was a good man." And he turned towards me and said, "That's it. That's what I had to say." And I brought him back to the ground. The unspeakable atrocities that this man witnessed and participated in are the same unspeakable atrocities that live in the bellies of soldiers, whether they're professional or those who wind up conscripted into the moment. The adults, the teenagers, the children who will return from this battle in Ukraine, whether Ukrainian or Russian. And there will be many moments of courage and of compassion and kindness that come to light as well. Even our flaming chalice is a symbol born of Unitarians risking their lives in the Second World War and rescuing 3,500 Jewish children. So I'm not sharing this reflection to be able to give you the answer. Rather, in these early days, we are left with these questions. What is the pathway of the least harm? What is the pathway of the most harm? What choice can we live with? And when we think we make the right choice and later regret our actions, can we learn to live with ourselves? What will lead to peacemaking as a constant activity? And how can we prevent war altogether? For that is the horizon we Unitarian Universalists are aiming for. So let us use this moment to move towards a greater justice, a greater amount of reconciliation, a greater amount of loving kindness than maybe the world or we have known before, knowing that we will have to move forward step by step, not yet having the answers. May all be guided by that light of love for all of humanity overflowing. And may we resist those who portray a vision of isolation. And may we move hand in hand, heart in heart, with every adult and child in the world. Amen and blessed be, and may it be so. Will you rise in body and in spirit, and let us sing our closing song, When Will the Fighting Cease?
When will the fighting cease? When will we live in peace? When our love breaks boundaries? When will the fighting cease? When will we live in peace? When our love breaks boundaries? When will the fighting cease? When will we live in peace? When our love breaks boundaries?
Our closing words are by Wayne Arneson. Take courage, friends. Battery. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard. The path is never clear. And the stakes are so very high. Take courage, for deep down, there is another truth. You are not alone. We are none of us alone. As you go forth this day, know you are blessed with myriad gifts. Go forth and share those blessings and gifts with a world desperately in need of your love and of your life. Blessed be. And I'll say for those staying for the Odyssey, we have some refreshments to tide you over. And the Odyssey will begin at 1 with Marcia Ivins. So see you all outside.